Mark hadn't planned on asking her. He stood in his small kitchen, one hand wrapped around a chipped blue mug, staring out the window at the quiet suburban street. It was just after 6:30 a.m., that strange calm hour before the neighborhood came alive, before school buses, lawn mowers, and the usual noise of life. His 8-year-old daughter, Lily, was still asleep upstairs, her unicorn nightlight probably still glowing faintly. Mark exhaled slowly. Dating help. The words felt ridiculous in his mouth. At 36, Mark Sullivan was a single dad, an accountant by profession, and a man who hadn't been on a real date in nearly 4 years. Since his wife, Emily, had passed away after a sudden illness, life had narrowed into something simple and exhausting. Work, parenting, repeat. He loved Lily more than anything, but somewhere between packing lunches and folding tiny socks, he'd stopped being a man and started being just a system that kept things running. And systems didn't date. The only reason the thought had even crossed his mind was because of Sarah Miller, his neighbor. Sarah lived next door, in the light gray house with the creaky porch step and the wind chimes that sang whenever there was a breeze. She was around his age, maybe a year younger, worked remotely as a graphic designer, and somehow always seemed calm in a way Mark wasn't anymore. She smiled easily, laughed easily, talked like life hadn't knocked the air out of her lungs once and never fully given it back. They weren't close friends, exactly. More like friendly constants. She waved when he pulled into the driveway. Brought over soup when Lily had the flu. Watched Lily once when Mark was stuck late at work. They talked about neutral things, weather, school, grocery prices, but never anything deep. Until yesterday. It had started with Lily. "Daddy," she'd said casually while coloring at the kitchen table, "why don't you have a girlfriend?" Mark had almost choked on his coffee. "That's a big question," he'd muttered. "Ethan's dad has one," Lily continued, filling in a rainbow with intense focus. "And Mrs. Carter says grown-ups need partners so they don't get lonely." "I'm not lonely," Mark replied too quickly. Lily looked up then, her eyes too observant for a child. "You look lonely sometimes." Kids had a way of landing punches without throwing them. That evening, Mark had run into Sarah while taking the trash out. She was struggling with a heavy Amazon box, and he'd helped her carry it inside. They chatted for a minute, nothing unusual, until she glanced at him and said, almost offhandedly, "You okay? You seem distracted." Mark could have lied. He almost did. Instead, something tired and honest slipped out. "Do you ever feel like you forgot how to start over?" Sarah paused. Really paused. Not the polite nod people give when they're half listening, but a full stop. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I do." The moment hung there, heavy but not uncomfortable. That was when the idea took root. Now, the next morning, Mark found himself standing on his porch, shoes on, jacket zipped, staring at Sarah's front door like it might bite him. This is stupid, he thought. But Lily's words echoed in his head. "You look lonely sometimes." He raised his hand. Knocked. The door opened a few seconds later. Sarah stood there in an oversized sweater, coffee in hand, hair loosely tied back. She smiled in surprise. "Hey, Mark. Everything okay?" Yeah, he said, immediately wishing he'd rehearsed. "I was just wondering if you had a minute." She stepped aside without hesitation. "Sure. Come in." They sat at her small dining table, morning light spilling across the surface. Mark stared at his hands, then finally looked up. "This is going to sound awkward," he said. Sarah smiled gently. "Those are usually the honest things." He took a breath. "I don't know how to date anymore. And I was wondering if you could help me. Just advice. From a woman's perspective." Sarah didn't laugh. She didn't tease. Instead, she studied him for a long moment, then set her coffee down carefully. "Mark," she said slowly, "I can give you advice. But I think what you actually need is permission." "Permission?" he frowned. "To stop punishing yourself for still wanting a life," she said. "Loving your daughter doesn't mean you're not allowed to want love too." Her words hit harder than he expected. Something shifted in his chest. And for the first time in years, Mark felt like maybe, just maybe, everything was about to change. Mark didn't tell anyone about the conversation. Not Lily. Not his sister. Not even his best friend from work who'd been trying to set him up with a very nice divorced dentist for months. Something about what Sarah said felt private. Like opening a door he wasn't sure he was ready to walk through yet. But he couldn't stop thinking about it. Permission. It was such a simple word, yet it echoed through his head during meetings, grocery runs, even while helping Lily with her math homework. Sarah hadn't told him what to do. She hadn't pushed him. She'd just named the thing he'd been avoiding. So on Sunday night, after Lily was asleep, Mark downloaded a dating app. He stared at the screen for a long time before touching anything. The profiles felt like a different universe, carefully angled photos, witty bios, people who looked well-rested and emotionally available. Mark uploaded one decent picture from a company picnic and wrote a painfully honest bio. Single dad. Coffee enthusiast. Still figuring things out. He hesitated before hitting save. Then he texted Sarah. Mark, I did the thing. Sarah, the thing? Mark, dating app. Sarah, face with open mouth proud of you. How does it feel? Mark, like I just walked into a room where everyone already knows the dance. She laughed when he told her that later, standing between their driveways while Lily played with chalk on the sidewalk. That's normal, Sarah said. Everyone pretends they're confident. They're not. So what's the rule? Mark asked. Do I need better pictures? A joke. A tragic backstory. Sarah leaned against her fence, thinking. Okay, rule number 1, don't try to impress. Try to be recognizable. The right person should feel like they already know you. That sounds suspiciously wise. She shrugged. Years of bad dates. That surprised him. He'd never thought much about Sarah's dating life. She never talked about an ex, never mentioned anyone serious. Somehow, he'd assumed she was just fine on her own. They kept talking about first date disasters, awkward silences, people who overshare too soon. Mark found himself laughing more than he had in weeks. It felt easy. Familiar. Too familiar. That night, his phone buzzed with a match. Her name was Jenna. 34. Marketing manager. Loved hiking and sourdough baking. Mark showed Sarah the profile the next morning like a teenager showing a report card. She's pretty, Sarah said, smiling. And she looks normal. That's a win. What do I say? Ask about something specific, Sarah replied. Shows you actually read her profile. So he did. They messaged for 3 days before Jenna suggested coffee. Mark panicked. He stood in front of his closet, trying on shirts he hadn't worn since before Emily got sick. Nothing felt right. Everything felt like a costume. When Sarah saw him pacing the driveway that afternoon, she raised an eyebrow. First date jitters? Is it that obvious? She stepped closer, straightened his collar without thinking, then froze for half a second before pulling her hand back. Sorry, she said quickly. Habit. It's okay, Mark replied, though his heart was suddenly doing something inconvenient. Listen, Sarah said, softer now. Don't think of this as the date. It's just coffee. You're allowed to leave early. You're allowed to not feel a spark. And you're allowed to want one. He nodded. Thanks. For all of this. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes this time. Anytime. The date went fine. Jenna was nice. Smart. Easy to talk to. They chatted about work, favorite shows, the insanity of grocery prices. She laughed at his jokes. He laughed at hers. Nothing was wrong. And yet, when Mark drove home, there was a hollow feeling he couldn't explain. It wasn't disappointment. It was comparison. He realized, uncomfortably, that he'd been waiting all evening to tell Sarah about it. Later that night, while Lily slept and the house was quiet, his phone buzzed. Sarah, how did it go? Mark, she was great. Sarah, great is a neutral word. Mark, I think I felt more relaxed talking to you about it than actually being there. There was a long pause before the typing dots appeared. Sarah, Mark. Sarah, that might mean something. Or it might mean you're still healing. Sarah, either way, don't rush to label it. He stared at the screen, heart pounding. Outside, The wind chimes on Sarah's porch began to ring softly. For the first time, Mark wondered if the help he'd asked for was quietly turning into something neither of them had planned, and whether they were both already breaking rules they'd never agreed to. Mark stopped checking the dating app. Not intentionally at first. He just forgot. Days passed. Then a week. The app sat unopened on his phone like an abandoned project, buried beneath work emails and Lily's school notifications. Jenna had sent a follow-up message. Friendly, polite, but Mark took hours to respond, then a full day. Eventually, the conversation thinned out on its own, like a candle running out of air. He told himself it meant nothing. But every morning, his attention drifted next door. Sarah's car. Her porch light. The sound of her screen door opening when she stepped out with coffee. They fell into a new rhythm, one that didn't need planning. Conversations over the fence. Shared laughs during dog walks they didn't technically share. Accidental moments that felt intentional. One evening, Lily came home unusually quiet. Rough day? Mark asked as he set her backpack down. She nodded. Some kids said moms are supposed to help with school projects, and that dads don't know how. Mark's chest tightened. And what did you say? I said you try, Lily replied. And that you're good at it. Later that night, Mark found himself knocking on Sarah's door again. She answered in yoga pants and a hoodie, surprise flickering across her face before softening. Hey. Everything okay? He told her about Lily. Sarah listened without interrupting, arms crossed loosely, eyes steady. When he finished, she didn't rush to comfort him. She chose her words carefully. You know, she said, kids don't need perfection. They need someone who stays. Mark swallowed hard. Emily stayed, he said quietly. Until she couldn't. The words escaped before he could stop them. Sarah's expression changed. Not pity, not fear, just understanding. She gestured toward the couch. Sit. Tell me about her. He hadn't done that in years. They talked for over an hour. About Emily's laugh. Her stubborn optimism. The way she used to hum while folding laundry. Mark's voice shook once, then steadied. Sarah listened like the story mattered because it did, not because it was tragic. At some point, Mark realized Lily's bedtime had long passed. He stood up abruptly. I should go. Sarah nodded, but neither of them moved right away. At the door, she said softly, you don't have to carry all of it alone. I know, Mark replied. What he didn't say was, I don't want to anymore. The next few days felt different. Charged. They didn't touch. Didn't flirt. Didn't cross any obvious lines. And yet, every interaction carried weight. A look held half a second longer. A joke that landed just a little too close to the heart. Then came the school fundraiser. Mark had completely forgotten about it until Lily reminded him that morning. Parents crowded the gym that evening, folding chairs arranged in uneven rows. Lily spotted Sarah almost immediately. She came. Lily whispered excitedly. Mark turned, surprised. Sarah waved from across the room. Hope it's okay I came. They needed volunteers. Of course, he said, meaning more than just that. They spent the evening side by side, helping kids with games, laughing at chaos. At one point, a teacher mistook them for a couple. Oh, you two are Lily's parents, she asked casually. Mark froze. Before he could correct her, Sarah smiled and said, We're lucky to know her. The teacher nodded and walked off. The moment stretched awkwardly, then neither of them addressed it. Later, outside under the parking lot lights, Lily ran ahead to the car. Sarah broke the silence. I should have corrected her. It's okay, Mark said. I didn't mind. She hesitated. I did. A little. He looked at her, surprised. Because it made me realize something, Sarah continued. I'm not just helping anymore. Mark's heart thudded. Is that bad? She shook her head slowly. I don't know. That's what scares me. They stood there, inches apart, the hum of distant traffic filling the space between them. I don't want to hurt Lily, Mark said. Or you. Sarah met his eyes. Then we have to be honest. Even if it's uncomfortable. Honest about what? She exhaled. About the fact that this stopped being neutral a while ago. Neither of them moved. Neither of them stepped back. For the first time, Mark understood that what they were circling wasn't just attraction, it was risk. Real, life-altering risk. And he wasn't sure how to walk away from something that already felt like home. It happened on a night that wasn't supposed to matter. No holiday. No celebration. Just a Thursday that ended heavier than it began. Mark was cleaning the kitchen when the power went out. The house fell into sudden darkness, the hum of appliances cutting off mid-breath. Lily called down from her room, startled, and Mark reassured her by flashlight, promising it was just the storm rolling in. Once she was settled again, he checked his phone. No signal. The whole block was out. Across the street, porch lights blinked dead. And next door, Sarah's house was dark too. Without thinking, Mark grabbed a jacket and walked over. He knocked. Sarah opened the door holding a candle, its soft light flickering across her face. She laughed lightly when she saw him. Guess the universe wants us to talk by candlelight now. Everything okay? He asked. Yeah. Just quiet. She stepped aside. Mark hesitated only a second before going in. They sat on opposite ends of the couch at first, rain tapping steadily against the windows. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was loaded. Sarah broke it. I almost told you not to come. Why didn't you? Because I didn't want to lie. Mark's chest tightened. She stared at the candle. I haven't dated anyone seriously since my divorce. He didn't know that. My ex left when I said I didn't want kids, she continued. He said I'd change my mind. I didn't. So he found someone who would. Mark listened, careful not to interrupt. Helping you, Sarah said quietly, felt safe. Until it didn't. Mark leaned forward, elbows on his knees. What changed? She looked up at him then, eyes shiny but steady. I care. And caring always costs something. The thunder cracked overhead. I'm not looking to replace Emily, Mark said. I know that fear lives in this house. I feel it too. Sarah's voice dropped. I'm not afraid of Emily. I'm afraid of becoming a temporary chapter in your healing. That landed hard. He reached out without realizing it, his hand stopping just short of hers. You're not temporary. Sarah swallowed. You don't know that. The power outage stretched on. The storm worsened. The candle burned lower. When it happened, it wasn't dramatic. No rush. No urgency. Mark's hand found hers. She didn't pull away. They looked at each other, really looked, years of loneliness, restraint, and unspoken want passing between them. I need to know this isn't a mistake, Sarah whispered. Mark answered honestly. I don't. But I know pretending nothing's there is the real mistake. That was enough. Their kiss was slow, hesitant at first, like they were asking permission from the moment itself. When Sarah's fingers curled into his jacket, something in Mark finally gave way. They broke apart just as softly. Sarah rested her forehead against his. This changes things. Yes, he said. I think that's the point. A sudden knock at the door made them both jump. Mark pulled back instantly. Sarah opened it to find Lily standing there in pajamas, clutching her flashlight. The lights are still out, Lily said sleepily. Then she looked at them, really looked. Her gaze moved from Sarah to Mark, then back. Oh, she said simply. Mark's heart dropped. Hey, kiddo. You okay? She nodded. Can Sarah come sit with us until the lights come back? Sarah froze. Every fear she'd ever had about crossing lines showed in her eyes. Mark knelt beside Lily. Only if Sarah wants to. Sarah took a breath. I want to, she said. They spent the rest of the night on Mark's couch, wrapped in blankets, Lily asleep between them. Nothing more happened. Nothing needed to. But when the power came back just before dawn, reality came with it. Sarah stood at the door, shoes on, eyes tired. We can't go back to pretending, she said. Mark nodded. I don't want to. She hesitated. Then tomorrow, we talk. About everything. Lily. The risks. He watched her walk back to her house as the sun rose. For the first time, Mark understood that love wasn't just about feeling ready. It was about being brave enough to face the consequences. Mark barely slept. When morning came, it felt too bright for the weight sitting in his chest. Lily ate her cereal quietly, unusually thoughtful, her spoon clinking softly against the bowl. "Daddy," she said at last, "are you and Sarah in trouble?" The question caught him off guard. "No," he said carefully. "Why would you think that?" She shrugged. Grown-ups whisper when they're scared. Kids, always seeing more than you want them to. After walking Lily to school, Mark stood in the driveway waiting. Sarah's door opened a few minutes later. She looked just as tired, and just as serious. They didn't start with small talk. Sarah gestured toward Mark's porch. "Can we sit?" They took opposite chairs, a deliberate distance between them, as if last night had been a dream they needed to confirm was real. "I need to say this first," Sarah began. "I care about you. That part isn't confusing anymore." Mark nodded. "Same. But caring isn't the hard part," she continued. "The hard part is Lily. And Emily. And the fact that I don't want children, and yet I'm already attached." Mark inhaled slowly. "I'm not asking you to be Lily's mother." Sarah looked at him, searching his face. "But she's part of your life. And if I'm in it, so am I." He couldn't deny that. "I spent years shrinking my life down to protect Lily," Mark said. "I told myself love was optional. Turns out it's not." Sarah's voice softened. "And I spent years protecting myself from becoming someone's almost." They sat with that. "What if we go slow?" Mark offered. "No labels. No expectations. Just honesty." Sarah smiled sadly. "That's how people get hurt." Before Mark could respond, Lily's voice came from behind them. "Are you talking about me?" They both turned. Lily stood on the porch steps, backpack on, school bus rumbling in the distance. Mark's heart stopped. "Hey, how long have you been there?" "Long enough," she said. She looked at Sarah, then back at her dad. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," Sarah said immediately, standing. "You didn't do anything wrong." Lily studied her, then said something that neither of them were prepared for. "My mom used to be sad before she got sick," Lily said quietly. "She said sad things don't go away unless you let other people help." Mark felt tears sting his eyes. Lily took a breath. "I like when you're around, Sarah. Daddy smiles more." Silence wrapped around them. Sarah knelt in front of Lily. "Eye level now." "I don't want to hurt you," she said honestly. Lily thought about that. "You won't. Because you're kind." That was it. Sarah stood up slowly, wiping her eyes. She looked at Mark, fear and resolve mixing together. "I can't promise I won't be scared," she said. "But I don't want to walk away." Mark's voice broke. "Neither do I." The bus honked. Lily climbed aboard, waving enthusiastically from the window like she'd just solved a problem adults couldn't. When the bus disappeared, Sarah let out a shaky laugh. "Your daughter is terrifyingly wise." "She gets it from her mom," Mark said softly. Sarah reached for his hand, this time without hesitation. "Okay," she said. "We try. For real. Slowly. Honestly." Mark squeezed her fingers. Together. As they stood there in the morning light, nothing felt perfect. But it felt possible. And for the first time since Emily's death, Mark believed that loving again didn't mean losing the past. It meant carrying it forward. Life didn't change all at once. It softened first. Weeks passed, then months. Mark and Sarah moved carefully, like people who knew exactly how much there was to lose. No rushing. No pretending. Just small, deliberate choices. Coffee on the porch, shared dinners, honest conversations that sometimes ended in silence instead of certainty. Sarah didn't move in. Not because she didn't care, but because they agreed that love didn't need speed to prove itself. She stayed next door, close enough to matter, far enough to breathe. Lily adjusted in her own quiet way. She didn't call Sarah Mom. No one asked her to. Instead, she called her when she needed help with art projects. Saved her a seat at school events. left handwritten notes on Sarah's fridge when she stopped by, tiny reminders that children accept what feels safe. One night, months later, Mark found Lily sitting on her bed holding an old photo. "Do you still miss Mom?" she asked. "Every day," Mark replied honestly. Lily nodded. "I think she'd like Sarah." Mark smiled through the ache. "I think so too." Sarah faced her own growth. She learned that loving a man with a past didn't mean living in its shadow. Emily was part of the story, not a competitor. There were moments of insecurity, birthdays, anniversaries, memories that surfaced unexpectedly, but Mark never shut her out. He let her see the grief and the gratitude. One autumn evening, the three of them sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, watching leaves tumble across the street. Lily leaned against Sarah's side without thinking. Sarah didn't pull away. She looked at Mark, and he saw it then, the decision she'd made quietly, bravely, without announcements. She wasn't afraid of the future anymore. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, Mark and Sarah stood under the same porch light where everything had started. "You know," Sarah said, smiling softly, "you never did need dating help." Mark chuckled. "I needed someone to tell me I was allowed to try." She reached for his hand. "And you did." A year later, nothing looked dramatic from the outside. Two houses. One shared life. On a spring morning, Lily ran between them carrying flowers for a school project. Mark watched from his porch as Sarah helped her tie the ribbon, laughing when it slipped. In that moment, Mark understood something simple and true. Love didn't arrive as a replacement. It arrived as an addition. A choice made every day. And for the first time since losing Emily, Mark felt whole, not because the pain was gone, but because joy had finally learned how to live beside it. The wind chimes rang softly. Life moved forward. And this time, he didn't hold it back.